Welcome back to the garage. Today we'll be going over the auction find that I ran across a couple weeks back, and that's this electric converted small block Chevy, whatever you want to call it. It's very unusual. I thought you all might like to see a video on it. This will be the first ever entry into a series called Rough Cuts. There'll probably be shorter videos, not a lot of editing done, just for the fact that some of these subjects aren't really that interesting to make a full video on, so you might hear vehicles go by in the background or loud noises or mowers from my neighbors next door. But anyhow, let's go over this electric converted small block Chevy. And the disclaimer in this video is, if you watch my videos regularly, you'll know that I'm not a clickbaiter. This isn't anything that I put together to try to get views. It's something that I bought that I think you might all find very interesting, so let's go over this a little bit further. Now, no offense to you small block Chevy people out there that are watching right now. I've never been a huge fan. I only actually bought this engine for what's sitting on top of it, which we'll go over that in a minute. But to go over the bottom half, the engine block, and show you what's all been customized, I have to take this stuff off of here. So we'll go over the bottom half of the engine. I'll talk about the 871 blower that's sitting on top of here. And then I'll show some pictures at the auction that I bought this from of what this engine actually went into. I think it's pretty interesting. We'll talk about that for a bit. And let me get this stuff off of here and we'll go from there. Now that these Go Fast goodies are off the top of the engine, I wanted to show you how much they actually trimmed out of here to fit all these capacitors in the cylinder head. You can see that the valley of this engine block has been completely cut out of here. Now, the old fella that passed away, unfortunately, and his family had the auction, had a regular machine shop on his property, so I'm really not sure what kind of machine he would have used to cut the valley out of this engine. But that was probably one major task in of itself. See that there's some metal put together down here. This actually held a heat coil, I guess you would call it. I'm not really sure what the terminology for a lot of these parts are. Got the timing cover on the front of it, has this motherboard. I'm not sure if a lot of this actually done something or if it was just for looks. It's got a nice aluminum crank pulley on it. This was actually in a car and it drove around on the guy's property kind of like a big golf cart, so it's pretty interesting to see that at one point this actually did power something. You can see inside this bell housing there are actually big magnets in here, I guess, that would help this spin up. But there's a lot of craftsmanship that went into this. And right before I turned the camera on, I just noticed, even though I've looked at this a lot, I think this bell housing is actually a wheel. You can see it steps up here in the center, and it looks like right here is where the tire would actually seat on the bead. But that's pretty interesting to see. This was actually hooked to a Muncie 4-speed transmission, I was told. I wanted to try my best to show you what they did on this engine in place of the crankshaft. You can see there's this flywheel back here with magnets on the inside of the bell housing. You have a rear bearing cap and the front bearing cap. Let me grab my light. It has been machined for a regular roller bearing to fit inside of it, and then they have this solid piece of 2-inch stock in place of the crankshaft. In the oil pan area of the engine, this was located. I'm not sure what this even is. There were also these big magnets inside and a whole mess of wiring. Now it's time to talk about this blower that's sitting over here. Now here's the reason that I bought all this mess in the first place. You've got a small block Chevy blower intake. You've got a 671 blower shell. Unfortunately, there are no turbines in here. But you've got the shell, a homemade intake adapter, And then you have the Mr. Gasket buzzard catcher. This Mr. Gasket buzzard catcher is around $250 to $300 with the shutters on the front. They're missing on this one, unfortunately. Then you've got the buzzard catcher adapter that goes on the top of this supercharger. Since there's no actual one for the carburetor to sit on, this is kind of a homemade deal, so it's kind of worthless in a way. Unfortunately, with the intake, you can see that somebody has altered this pretty bad. They cut a big chunk out of the valley itself, and they also cut one of the supports that goes in between to tie both of these sides together. That's not as much of an issue to me as the bottom of it is, but I do know a buddy that has a welding shop that can weld this up for me. At the moment this video's out, I can't weld aluminum myself. I don't have the equipment to do so, but I think you can put a flat plate in here, make sure these edges are beveled pretty good, lay some nice welds, and that shouldn't be a problem. It's amazing to think, though, that this intake is over $450 by itself, not to mention the old school blow-off plate, Hawaiian blow-off plate that's on here. That's around $250 by itself. But what they done was cut the bottom of this out to fit this piece in there. Now I don't know what it is. I don't know if this even really accomplished anything. On the bottom side, they had this whole mess of wiring. Now I guess what they were trying to do is put this all in here and make it look like the blower was spinning when the engine was on. It's pretty amazing to think the guy that had this and put it all together had all the machines to do it, a lathe, the horizontal mill, and he didn't just cut a hole in here to put the wiring through, he cut the entire bottom out of this intake. It's pretty sloppy, but like I said, I think a friend of mine can weld this up. Like I mentioned about the inside of the blower, it's actually gutted. The screws, turbines, blades, whatever you want to call them, I'm not sure on the terminology, they're both missing. But this front gear case I looked up on eBay, they're actually selling for $250 plus, so it's nice to have that part of the puzzle figured out. On the back side, it just has a blank made out of aluminum, just to cover up the back side of this blower. But like I mentioned, it's nice to have this front gear case on it. I just need to find out now what kind of a snout I need to run the actual blower, but it's nice to have a good amount of these parts sitting here. I'll tell you one thing, even though this is empty on the inside, this thing is pretty heavy.
Are they heavy?
Yeah.
Then they're expensive. Put them back.
Hopefully you enjoyed today's first ever rough cut video on this auction find that I ran across a couple months back. Like I mentioned, I don't want to spend a lot of time on subjects like this, something that I ran across at an auction. I thought you may find it kind of interesting. I've got a lot of stuff to catch up before wintertime rolls around, so this video will be, in all honesty, kind of thrown together. What did I pay for it? Well, I think I done good on the price. I paid $400 for everything. I'm not interested in any way, shape, or form in the engine itself. I was only interested for the intake, blower, and the buzzard catcher on top of it. Everything else, I actually have a nephew when I was loading this engine up at the auction. He acted like he wanted to buy the block and all of the electronics for this. I'll try to sell them back to him if I can. I'll go ahead and throw in a picture of the car this engine was in. It run on the property, like I said, like a big golf cart. It would spin up to 9,000 RPM, I was told, but it kept blowing these capacitors. Now the car, the body wasn't sold together, which is nice for me because I really wanted this blower. But the thing of it is, the car didn't even have a title. It was fairly rough, even though the paint looks nice. And it sold for $9,000. No joke. $9,000. It was like $9,400 or $9,500, which I think is an insane price for a vehicle that does not have a title or any paperwork whatsoever. But the person that bought it was tickled about it, and that's pretty cool with me, I guess, as long as you're happy with what you buy. But I'll go ahead and throw some pictures up of the other things that I was interested in this auction. There was an old Dynaho backhoe with a 353 Detroit in it, which I'm pretty sure was locked up. The thing that I was really after was a 1946 white superpower. This was a 2-day auction. This guy had all kinds of machinery that sold, all kinds of lathes and horizontal mills. It was about 95 degrees outside, and there was no shade on this place. There was all kinds of old cars in the field. I really wanted that white superpower, and the first day they sold the machinery and some of the stuff in the garage. I stuck around the entire day. The second day, right before they sell this truck, the lady that was conducting the auction backed out, changed her mind, and wanted to keep the only truck that I was there to buy. So I guess better luck next time, you might say. I was pretty aggravated about it, but there ain't much you can do. So it's about 95 degrees in the garage right now, so I'm going to try to make this ending as short and as sweet as possible. But instead of leaving you with the usual words that I do at the end of these videos, I wanted to leave you with a quote that I actually seen today that put a smile on my face and makes a lot of sense. A bad attitude is just like a flat tire. You won't go anywhere in life unless you change it. My name is Zane, and I'll catch you next time.